Good afternoon. Welcome in, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. We'll give it just a couple of seconds here to let some folks join. If you're able and interested, go ahead and put into the chat box what state you're joining us from today and say hi. Hi, Erin. Maryland, Montana. Oh my goodness, lots of places. Texas, Virginia, Tennessee, Ohio. That's where I'm in Ohio too. Colorado, Michigan, Wisconsin, Vermont, Missouri, Arkansas, all over. Wonderful. New Hampshire, Washington State, Florida, Texas, South Carolina. Awesome. I'm so glad to see everybody. It's wonderful to see you all. Hopefully, the weather is playing nice for you and you're not having anything crazy. Looks like our numbers have stabilized just a little bit, so I'll go ahead and get us moving. So, welcome. My name is Amber Johnstone. I'm with the ALS Association. Thank you for joining us for another installment of our Empowering Your ALS Journey webinar series. The goal of this series is to empower you to live fully and with purpose, regardless of where you are in your ALS journey. The title of today's webinar is When Life Shifts, Supporting Families Through Changes in the ALS Journey. Just a few things I want you to know before we begin. First, know that you're muted and not on camera, so you can relax and enjoy the presentation. We'll be using both the chat and the Q&A features today to allow you to participate in the discussion. Please take a moment now and locate those buttons at the bottom of your screen. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and use that chat feature to say hi and let us know what state you're joining us from. There will be some time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. And to make it easier for our panelists to separate the questions from the general chat, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit your question. And you can do that at any time during our webinar. We do have a short survey that we'll ask you to complete after the webinar. You don't need to do anything. It'll appear automatically in your browser once the webinar ends. The survey helps us know your thoughts on the presentation and topics you'd like us to consider in the future. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded and it'll be available on our Empowering Your ALS Journey webinar page in about 1 week. This is also where you can view recordings from our previous webinars. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker today, Tanya Hitchman. With more than 20 years in community engagement as Marketing Director of Care Services at the ALS Association, Tanya brings purpose to her work by driving health and well-being initiatives, fostering trauma-informed resiliency, and turning connections into collaborative relationships where both people and goals thrive together. Her background includes many years supporting families engaged with child protective services, where she developed expertise in child and family advocacy, behavioral health support, and trauma-informed care. That experience fueled her lifelong commitment to helping children and families build resilience and find strengths in life's challenges. Today, Tanya brings that same compassion and purpose to her work with the ALS Association, where she supports families and caregivers walking through the ALS journey with dignity and hope. Outside of her work, Tanya treasures time with her husband, Rod, their 15-year-old son, and their family in England, including their daughter, son-in-law, and 1-year-old grandson. She also enjoys gardening, traveling, and is a lover of dogs, volunteering with a local Labrador rescue in her spare time. Tanya, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Amber. And Amber ended that introduction talking about my work with Labrador Rescue. So if you happen to see my Labrador Kate, she's named after Kate Middleton, jump up on the sofa here behind me. She likes to kind of do the George Costanza stretch for everybody. If you know what I'm talking about from Seinfeld, you can just give her a little wave. And I can't see you do that, but just know that you may see her. I'm so glad that you all are here. Again, I can't see you, but I want this to be interactive. This is a discussion. It's not a presentation or a webinar, even though that's what it's called. It's a discussion where we can all be honest and share without judgment. Some of you joining today may be very newly diagnosed. Some of you may be providing support and care for somebody you love. And others of you are a little bit farther along in the journey and are carrying wisdom that you didn't necessarily want or didn't ask for. This is a safe place for everybody. And again, want it to be interactive. Today, we're really going to look at the ALS journey, and I'm going to move to a roadmap or a road. ALS is not just a physical journey, it's an emotional, relational, and family journey. Again, I encourage you, and maybe your loved ones are watching this with you, to use the chat. Amber will let me know if we've got comments or questions that we need to pause for, because that's the goal. We're going to pause for those conversations, for those comments, and for support. And the goal for today is for us to really talk about the ALS journey, the emotional and practical challenges along the way. Y'all, and I'm from Texas, y'all, we're going to name, we're going to acknowledge anticipatory grief. Today is going to have a lot of information. It's going to be a lot of heavy information. And yet, we're also going to talk about laughter as a strategy and how you stay connected to those that you love on purpose. I encourage you and support you in taking as much of this information as you need today. Maybe today you just need to just be here and not take it in, but you want to be a part of this group. This is your journey to travel in whatever way works best for you. So when we talk about the ALS journey, which is heavy, and we name and acknowledge anticipatory grief, take that time, take that space, whatever you need. We're going to talk about conversations and some of the planning considerations that are a part of the journey. And our goal is at the end of this webinar, you feel more supported, more prepared, and less alone. So hopefully those are things on a roadmap we can all agree on. Again, please interact, share your thoughts. Amber will share those with me as those come up. And I'd like to start off with an icebreaker, okay? So I'm going to try to look at the chat too. If not, I'll rely on Amber to share that. So if ALS were a road trip, all right, if ALS were a road trip, today you might feel like what? Are you on an unexpected detour with roadblocks? Are you a passenger that's just trying to catch your breath? Are you totally lost? Let's hear from you. I think I can see the chat too. Yeah, okay, great. In the Grand Canyon, that's the first thing that I saw. And you know what? If an emoji is easier for you to use, please put that in there. You may be using an alternative communication device, so you use whatever is easiest for you.
Anya, there are some great comments. Someone said they feel like they're a passenger that does not have control. Someone says walking down the road. Someone says a fork in the road. Another one says, I feel like I'm out in the woods on a dirt road, kind of lost. All kinds of really good descriptions.
Thank you. Keep those coming. And thanks for that, Amber. I appreciate you sharing those. And thank you for sharing in the chat. Again, I want this to be interactive. Whether you typed a word, an emoji, or maybe you just sat there and thought to yourself and took a quiet breath, just seeing and hearing the range of responses reminds us that there's no single way to experience ALS, right? And I want you to keep that in mind today. Every ALS experience is unique. Sure, there may be shared stages, which we're going to talk about, and experiences and symptoms, but every journey is unique. and there's no single way to experience ALS. The next thing we're going to talk about are the stages, if you will, of ALS. There are no entrances or exits. It's not linear. Oops, let me get back to this. And so I've got this up here and I want us to pause. I want everybody to take a breath as you look at this and just think about where you may be. You could be anywhere on this path. The path progresses differently for everybody. And the stages, they're not rigid, they're not linear. It's a continuum. And so I ask that you keep that in mind today as we're talking about these stages or transitions or shifts, right? Today we're talking about when life shifts. So think about those shifts and know that you can shift forward, you can shift backwards, and there's not ever a starting point or a stopping point. It's always an ebb and flow. And so everything we're talking about today are hopefully resources that you can go back to along that road. And throughout all of these stages and transitions, there's oftentimes loss and adaptation. Those things are always happening. So as we begin, we're going to start where many journeys actually first shift. And that's at the moment of diagnosis and those early days that follow. Not because it defines everything, because it's often where everything changes. So as we look at this, diagnosis and early adjustment, it's so, so important to get education, to really separate fact from fiction, to talk to your multidisciplinary team. And if you're not connected with the multidisciplinary team, to talk to your care services team here at the ALS Association. And let me tell you, if you don't know who your care services navigator and support individual is, I can help you find them. And I can also tell you that every single person at the ALS Association is a navigator for you. So reach out to any of us and we'll connect you with the individual that's going to have the most information, education, and resources for you to really begin getting all of the facts that you need. You need to gauge how much information you want as well. Those are conversations that you need to have. So throughout this webinar, we're going to talk about the stages and kind of those practical challenges that we know are happening. And then what are the essential conversations that need to be happening along the way? Essential conversations are almost always difficult, y'all. And throughout the journey, keeping in mind that your frustration, that your anger, all of those emotions you feel are at the diagnosis, not at your loved one. And so it's important for each of you, all of you, everybody that's involved in the journey to gauge how much information you want. And I like to use the analogy of a life toolbox. I'm big on life toolboxes anyway. Sometimes we want the whole toolbox and to see what do I need in here? And you want to look through there. Oh, yeah, I need this today, or I think I can just use this. And sometimes we don't want the whole toolbox. We want just a wrench. I just need the wrench today. So gauge how much information you want, but seek it out from trusted sources, the ALS Association, your multidisciplinary team, and really identify what's important to you in symptom management. What worsens symptoms, what does not, and decide on the next steps. And again, those essential conversations really sometimes begin with vulnerability, right? And saying, I'm scared. How does care, connection, and compassion stay at the forefront of everything that we're doing? Okay. And so I will pause. I'm going to pause a lot throughout this webinar to see if there's any comments or questions in the chat that Amber can share so that we are supporting you and not just talking at you.
No additional questions
Okay.
right now, but Just
Okay.
still lots of great comments, lots of variety of where everyone feels like they are on their journey.
Okay. Whoops. Thank you, Amber. So again, step by step, connect and engage. That's really what you've got to keep top of mind. So as we look at this next slide, and these are going to be, again, things that you go back to often, okay? These are some resources that are available to you. They are not all the resources. So in that early stage, that transition of diagnosis and early adjustment, are you affiliated with a multidisciplinary clinic? If not, let us know. We want to connect you to one. Have you thought about research and clinical trials? Many of those, it's important that you get into those and connect with someone early on. Again, talking to your care services navigator about many resources like My ALS Journey, our connection and support groups, the resource guides, empowering your ALS journey, like this webinar, and the Resilient Hearts Toolkit for caregivers. This stage, if you will, it's not just about the medical information, it's about those questions that pop into your mind at 2 in the morning. It's about trying to hold on to normal when everything around you is everything but normal. And I want to offer you this reassurance, okay? And take another deep breath with me. You don't have to remember everything today, or you don't have to remember everything that you hear along the way. You don't have to feel hopeful or strong right now on this webinar or today or always. You simply have to be here. Feeling overwhelmed doesn't mean that you're doing this wrong. Wanting information and avoiding information can coexist at the same time, just like hope and fear. So when you're having these conversations in this early stage, and let me just add that the early stage of diagnosis could still be for some individuals more advanced progression. Maybe you've had those symptoms and just got the diagnosis, or maybe you don't have any symptoms and got the diagnosis. That's why everything on the journey is not linear. You could be anywhere on this path at any time. So, in that early stage of diagnosis, the conversations and support look less like answers and more like a steady presence, trusted guidance. And it's really realizing that every family member needs to move at their own pace, and that could be very different for everybody in your family, with an early focus on self care and mental health. Okay. Remember that those fears and feelings are at the disease, they're not at each other. And also, those fears and feelings are better aired than ignored because they're going to bubble up again later, right? So, this is your personal library of resources and support. This is just a little bit of what the association has for you, but I want you to go back to your library often because you may not need something today, but you may need it tomorrow. Or you looked at it yesterday, but you didn't see what you're going to need 2 weeks down the road, or 2 months, or 2 years. This is your personal library to go back to. Our care services team is here to help you every step of the way throughout every transition and stage with resources. And you're not alone. So again, there's so many. You'll see the resources guides, the multidisciplinary team, our nationwide connect support groups. There's so many more. So keep going back to your resources and support. Okay. We're going to have a little bit more engagement for you all. And I've got this slide up here too for you to think about as we connect and engage in the chat. Children and youth don't need all of the details, but they do need honesty, reassurance, and a place in the conversation. So we've got resources for young kiddos as well. Looking in the Lights is an incredible cartoon that helps share the ALS journey for those younger minds and hearts. So talk to your care services team member about those resources too. If you're comfortable, and in the chat, you can finish this sentence. In the early days after diagnosis, what I needed most was, And please put that in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Amber, I will let you share too. I appreciate you.
Yeah, lots of great questions or lots of great answers. People are saying support, love, information, answers to a million questions, to take a breath, time to cry, to share with others my shock, to know that
Yeah,
others were aware of what was happening so I didn't feel alone.
yeah.
A, a time machine. I really like that one.
Hmm. Those are so great. I heard so many things in there, and somebody in that chat said um, something along the lines of sharing with friends and family. That's part of an essential conversation early on too, right? Who do we share with? Who's going to be our network? When do we share, and how do we start recognizing and identifying additional support early on? Because we don't want to get to an empty tank before we start having that conversation and identifying that network. Those are really, really good. Keep them coming. I know Amber will share anything in there, um, and things that maybe we have forgotten about that we want to touch on. Y'all, this is where anticipatory grief starts creeping in. It can be pretty quiet, even before any major changes are visible. And I have a visual on here of a ripple because it oftentimes starts out as just those little ripples. It's not a constant sadness or weight. It's intermingled in a day where things are going great and there's happy moments, and then you may just have a moment of sadness. Maybe you're thinking about something in the moment or something in the future. It could be fleeting or it could be heavy for all day or for weeks. So, anticipatory grief brings those moments of grief that coexist with hope, love, and joy. So, when you feel those, don't think, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? This is a happy time. Those all can coexist, and it's totally normal. It's a normal response for both the individual living with ALS and those closest to them, right? When we talk about anticipatory grief, doesn't mean giving up. It means noticing that things are different and they're changing, and you're acknowledging that. Because again, not acknowledging it doesn't make it go away. And throughout the ALS journey, there are losses, there's adaptations, and to expect for that not to touch your heart in moments of happiness and joy, as well as in grief, is just not realistic, right? So give yourself that permission, okay? The next stages, and I say those and say transitions, and remember these are very fluid. These things here may have been a part of your diagnosis in the early days that follow stage because it's so different for everyone. When we talk about adapting to change, there's a lot of shifting roles that are in there too. So when we think about those practical challenges that we talked about at the beginning and identifying those, it's exploring treatments again, research and clinical trials, noticing those subtle or rapid changes. For some, there are no changes, and others, it's literally, and I have heard this waking up, and you know this on a morning, and I can't grip the golf club like I did yesterday. It maybe started in one hand, and now it's the other hand, or it's a leg, or it's in my speech. Your strength is becoming a little bit less. You're getting a little bit more fatigued. And so there's increased dependence. There's caregiving roles that are intensifying. And remember, if you've got those kiddos in the house, they're involved in that too. So the changes in the relationship dynamics are definitely happening. and there's emotional strain for those living with ALS and for those who are caring for them. So the visual I have on this slide is actually of our virtual home modification and safety assessment program. It's the puzzles in the house, but I thought it was really practical for this slide because in these stages of adapting to change, whether it's subtle or rapid, and those shifting roles, everything feels like a ginormous puzzle and none of the pieces are fitting, right? It's like we don't even know what to do next. Your support is really talking about quality of life. Have these conversations early on, whether it's about breathing and respiratory support, nutrition, your equipment needs. You want to have those things on hand before you wake up and need them, right? Again, research and clinical trials, the home modifications. Again, our virtual home modification and safety assessment program will give you an expert looking at your home virtually by Zoom or WhatsApp, whatever works for you, to identify those things that are needed to keep your home safe and have those conversations about expanding your circle of support. We weren't meant to do life alone. We just weren't. And you certainly can't do the ALS journey alone. So, really, in this transition stage, ALS is not waiting for anybody to catch their breath. Um, Everything could be changing at once, those roles are changing. And so, you really need to have those essential conversations. And if you are caring for someone that you love with ALS, having those essential conversations really begins with leading with curiosity and not assumptions, right? You want to have those open-ended conversations and look for opportunities. Assuming needs and wishes, it can unintentionally take away the autonomy. But having those honest and ongoing conversations can really help protect your relationship. And it's okay to table a conversation. Maybe you start having it and say, you know what? We're both not at a place for this right now. So we're going to table it as long as you come back to it, right? You don't want to avoid it. Because what's happening here and what's shifting is not just the body and the physical changes, but it's identity, it's independence, and the roles are shifting. And what often shifts next is not just the roles and the caregiving, but who's providing it. And you've got to have those conversations so that you're not getting to a point where, gosh, I wish we had done this sooner. Again, I'm going to pause for everybody to take a breath before we move on to how we really navigate some of those practical challenges in this transition stage and see if anybody has any questions or comments, because this is a lot. And remember, it can all be happening at once.
Tanya, there are a couple of really good
Okay.
questions. One is, what conversations do you start with? And
Yeah.
another is, how can I support someone who lives far away?
Oh, great questions. Y'all, thank you. Keep those questions coming. What conversations do you start with? That is such a personal journey. And yet, I think having those early conversations about, I don't think it's ever too early. And again, this is such a personal journey. And yet, I think even in that diagnosis and early stage, you're just candid and raw and vulnerable and just saying, if you're a caregiver, I'm scared and I don't know. And if you're living with ALS, you're probably going to say that too. Those conversations are on how do you want to live? What are the things that are important to you? What matters as a priority? And let's focus on this together. And as a caregiver and someone who loves you deeply, let's talk about my needs. And I want to talk about how we're going to have support so that I can focus or we can focus on caring for you in the best way possible. And if you live far away, that's definitely a challenge. I think you need to talk to those that are in the area and see who may be there, if there's friends, family. You know, when you think about your care team, It's immediate family, it's church family, it's your lifelong friends. People want to help, they just don't always know how. So I think if you can have someone that is in the family kind of leading that charge, even if they're across the country, they can help coordinate that help. And I don't know if that answered both of those questions, so I'm going to pause and see if there's any follow-up for that.
Have a feeling you answered that well. And there's lots of other good questions coming
Okay.
in. I'm saving some for the end too.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you. All right, we've got the gas tank here because we would be remiss if we didn't talk about self-care. It's got to start from the beginning. We should all be doing that right now. And I can't see you all, but from a raising of hands, I bet you all of us could improve in that area, right? We may be aware of self-care, but are we really focused on it? And you have to be throughout the ALS journey. Again, whether you're living with ALS, there's self-care, emotional well-being, and whether if you're caring for someone living with ALS, it's the same. So again, part of self-care and maintaining that full tank, it's getting educated. Knowledge truly is power. Know what your options are so that you have the power to make those decisions. You know, Viktor Frankl, I've read many of his books. And so, Man's Search for Meaning, the message behind that is when life throws us those curveballs and takes away so much and things that we didn't plan for, what it can't take away is our ability to be resilient and to choose. That power is ours. And so knowledge helps you have that power to choose how you're going to respond to ALS. Okay. Can't change the diagnosis, but you can certainly choose how you're going to respond to it. And that's what we want to give you are those tools to help you respond. So get educated. If you are able to, everybody's able to meditate, to just take some time to pause. And if you're able to do deep belly breathing, those breaths that are just way down in your stomach and where you're breathing out, it calms your brain. Just finding time throughout a day to do that. Purpose. No matter what we're going through in life, we've got a purpose and we've got unique gifts, and we can use those at any time. We may have to adapt how we're using them, and we're going to talk about that, but those gifts are still there. Seek and accept help. Again, I'm going to raise my hand because I can't see all of you. Who has a little bit of a hard time asking for help? Again, you've got a network of people that want to help you. They just need to know how to do it. And stay connected with others. I applaud you for the courage to be on here today because connecting with others is one of the greatest gifts. And it's a gift in meeting other people on the ALS journey. Nobody asked to be a part of this family, but we're all related. And so stay connected with others. I see some more things popping up in the chat. So Amber, I'm just going to let me know if there's anything we need to stop for.
Really well.
Okay. And y'all choose laughter as a strategy. Today, you may be in a spot where that's just not even something you can think of. I have had so many conversations with caregivers, with those living with ALS, and laughter is involved. A caregiver said, I went to go help him transition from wheelchair to the bed, and it didn't quite go as we planned, and we ended up doing a little dance, but we made it a moment, we made it a memory, and we laughed. All right. Laughter really, it provides perspective in conflict. And so just keep that in the back of your mind. You're not going to be able to laugh every day, but there are going to be moments that you'll be able to find that laughter. Okay. So when we again go back to adapting to those changes, whether they're subtle or rapid, and the shifting roles. Keep in mind, it's not linear. You may experience this stage, this transition over weeks or months or even years with little noticeable changes, or you could be having some major changes all the time. Go back to that resource library all the time because the resources are there and the team members are there. It's not so much about what's on the shelf, it's about the people that are connecting you to that. So, our team is here to connect you so that you know you're not alone no matter where you are on the journey. Again, the independence and mobility team who will talk to you about equipment that can help you and those virtual home modification and safety assessments, support groups. There's caregiver education course that is phenomenal to help those caring for somebody. And y'all, do you remember we talked about purpose? That no matter where you are on life's spiral, you've got purpose. And we have an amazing creative pursuits program that allows you to use your gifts of music, writing, art, and so many other things. And maybe you're adapting in how you're doing those, but you still have those gifts and that purpose. And these stages and transitions, the conversations are really related to how do you want to live? One of the questions in the chat was, what kind of conversations do we have? How do you want to live? What do you want? What don't you want? Do you not want a feeding tube ever? Is that something that we don't even need to talk about? Or do we need to talk about having it now so that breathing is not an issue? There's so many things to consider. And if you don't have those conversations, you're gonna maybe wake up one morning and say, gosh, we've got to decide this right now. Frustration, guilt, fear, all of these are coexisting right now, okay, in this big stage. There's loss of identity for both the individual living with ALS and for their loved ones. Continued focus on mental health and self-care. And again, anticipatory grief is in there and it's intensifying in these stages, right? Okay. I'm going to pause a little bit and I'm going to ask you to put some more information in the chat. Again, we want to be engaged. If there's things we're missing, let's talk about it. In these stages, what was one thing, and maybe you're not there yet. So if you are in this area right now, if you're on this part of the road, what's one thing that helped you the most? Was it learning new tools? Was it patience from others, grace from others? What's helped you?
Tanya, we have someone who commented, wisdoms from my faith keepers. It's a choice to rejoice. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. Find a way to make difficult situations into an adventure. Have fun with it somehow.
Yes, I want to applaud that for sure. Thank you to whoever put that in there. Absolutely. Anybody else? What's one thing that has helped you the most?
Acceptance. Someone else said ALS United, support groups, navigators, and webinars. And another person said the number of people. I'm guessing they mean people that are around them, their village.
Yeah, your village. It takes a village, right? Again, we weren't meant to do life alone. You've got to have that village. Thank you for sharing. Keep sharing those in there. You don't have to wait for an invitation. Oftentimes, what has helped us is deeply personal too, right? And individuals don't know the difference that they're making, but we know that we need that help along the way. All right. Thank you for sharing. Anticipatory grief, it's there and it's getting a little bit deeper. Okay. We started out with ripples, and maybe you started out with waves. Again, there's no single way to experience ALS, but it's waves now. Okay. It's not a straight line. Again, grief can coexist with love, connection, and moments of peace. Those can happen. Different family members may grieve at different times and in different ways. If you're living with ALS, you're grieving your loss of independence. I'm not able to do this anymore. I need more help doing this. If you're caring for somebody that you love with ALS, your grief is, I'm sad that he or she can't do this anymore. And I share in that grief with them. That is totally normal. Grieving loss of independence happens on both sides, and anticipatory grief and naming it can reduce isolation and emotional exhaustion. We talked about that fuel tank. If you don't acknowledge anticipatory grief and even some of the burnout, if you're a caregiver, if you don't acknowledge that, it doesn't make it go away. At this stage of the journey, anticipatory grief, it's often more visible, but that doesn't mean that it's always just out there, okay? And it's not because love has changed, it's because change is more constant. And I've talked to so many individuals that said, I didn't understand why I felt so heavy and sad when things were going as well as they could be. And I felt awful for it. Don't, don't give yourself permission to travel that journey in your way. And anticipatory grief and needing support, it's not a loss of independence. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength and acknowledging all that you're dealing with. As we go and move along the road into these next stages and transitions, I've got them again combined together because they really are overlapping. Advanced ALS and complex care and end of life and legacy, those are intertwined. And these things are actually hopefully being talked about early on, right? It's never too soon. At these stages, the complex care needs are visible. There's increasing support in physical dependence, communication challenges, nutrition, respiratory support. Some of those essential conversations that you need to have with your loved one are about respiratory support, invasive versus non-invasive. What do you want? What what is important to you? That should always be at the priority. And when we're talking to caregivers, and this is for you caregivers that are on here, as a caregiver, the conversations with your loved one should be honest about what you're experiencing, and your loved one living with ALS is sharing what they want as someone living with ALS. And part of your honor and responsibility as a caregiver is to advocate for that for them. There is a growing focus on comfort and quality of life. You've got to have those conversations. They're intimate. Hopefully, they're ongoing and not last minute. And they really need to reflect your personal values and your wishes. We're talking about things like approaches to care, whether it's palliative care, hospice, and advanced directives. Find windows, moments when those conversations can happen naturally. They really shouldn't be forced. Sometimes you're in a situation where you've got to have those. But these stages, these interlapping transitions are all about increased support, your network of people. That's why we've got this visual on here. Your multidisciplinary team, your caregiver support network, your friends, your family, near and far, and how you're focusing on comfort and quality of life. Talking about comfort, wishes, and legacy doesn't take away hope. It can bring relief because it allows your care as a caregiver to align with the wishes of your loved one. and it gives families permission to focus on connection and not just logistics. If this feels like a lot, it's understandable. This is a lot. These conversations don't have to happen all at once. They just need to happen. You need to create space for those. Again, I'm going to pause so we can breathe before we move on. See if anybody has any comments about what's helped you in this transition stage, what you still need if you're in this transition stage. A lot of families have told me, I wish I had these conversations earlier, not because I was necessarily ready for them, but because I wanted more time to have the conversations.
Did have a question earlier, Tanya, about how to have those important conversations with someone who is not quite accepting of their illness.
That's really good. And I'm glad that that question was put in there because I encourage you to talk to a therapist, to counselors, to your social worker at clinics to help you bring up those topics, to have those conversations. And that's really challenging because as someone caring for someone that you love, you want to have those conversations so you know. And so I think you really got to get that expert guidance on how those conversations are brought up. And there's no one right or wrong way to do that. It really is going to depend upon that individual. You can't make them have that conversation. That's really tough. But we have to respect where everybody is on that journey as well. I know some of those comments or thoughts may be still coming in the chat. So I wanted to add a little bit more context to these transition stages. And again, you've seen it on every transition stage, talking to your care services navigator and the team, going back to the library of resources and support, and even local community resources and referrals. In these stages, there should be conversations about legacy and estate planning. Again, approaches to care. We have 10 things to know about respiratory, about nutrition to help you get educated. Right at the beginning of this webinar, we talked about how important it was to be educated to make those decisions that are best for you and connection and support groups. So, in these stages, the conversations are focused on comfort and what matters most. And again, we talked about this earlier. Look for those windows. These conversations are not about giving up, they're about caring intentionally. And legacy begins long before the last days. So I don't know if we have any other comments in the chat, Amber.
Some great comments on how helpful palliative care has been and getting involved in that early.
Yes, for sure. That's a great, great point. Absolutely. Many multidisciplinary clinics have a palliative care specialist, doctor on staff. Not all of them do for sure, but talk to your care services navigator, your team, because there's also community resources as well. That's a really, really great point. I want to share here too, and Amber, stop me if anybody else puts anything in the chat. And y'all, we talked about laughter as a strategy. And in my experience, I've been with the association for about 6.5 years. I've had so many conversations with individuals living with ALS and their loved ones, whether it's a spouse or an adult child. And laughter's always been a big part of that. And sometimes you laugh at things that could be really dark humor, right? That others wouldn't laugh at if they weren't on this journey, and yet they aren't. So it's part of your journey. You don't have to force the conversations. Maybe it's things that are said that give you a window and said, you know what, I'm really glad that you mentioned this. I'd love to know more about how you feel about this. What does this look like for you? What does your quality of life look like to you? What matters to you? Not to me, but what matters to you? I'll share something, and again, I can't see your faces, so I'm hoping that everybody receives this in a positive way from my experience. My mom is 75 years old, and we typically on Sundays go over there for summer Sundays, and it's time by the pool to just spend time as family. We cook out burgers or whatever. Sometimes we don't even get in the pool. My mom and I were talking one day about a bunch of random things, and it somehow got on to, and this is a window, right? All of us should be talking about our legacy and estate planning. ALS makes us think about it more, but we should all be thinking about it. So my mom started talking about this, and she said, my mom loves karaoke. That is her thing. And she loves Alicia Keys. This girl is on fire. I don't know if any of you know that song. And my mom looked at me and she said, you know what? At my celebration of life, I don't want this. I want this. And she said, and I want to be cremated and I want my song to be played. And I was like, Mom, you want me to be at your celebration of life with your ashes playing This Girl Is on Fire. We laughed so hard that we couldn't stop. And when we stopped, we were crying and it was happy tears. And my mom looked at me and she said, I feel so at peace because you know what I really want. And I know you're going to do that. We didn't schedule time for that conversation. It wasn't part of our summer Sunday, but it happened. So find those windows where you can be honest, you can have laughter, and you can really share that vulnerability. And I'm going to end before we have just an open discussion time. And I don't have a presentation on my screen. Um, please avoid Isolation Island. Again, we weren't meant to do life alone. And it doesn't take long to get to Isolation Island and saying, we've got this. We just don't want anybody to know. We don't want help from anybody. We just need to take care of this. Doesn't take long to get on Isolation Island, but it can be so, so hard to find that rescue boat off. You are not alone. The ALS community is unlike any other I have ever been a part of in locking arms with each other, with other caregivers, with others living with ALS. So please do not get on Isolation Island. I am going to stop sharing. So hopefully I can hear from more of you. And this time is yours, is to ask and to share what you need most.
Well, that was fantastic. And I want to say thank you to everybody who is here today and for participating and sharing as much as you have. It's I think it's just important for this community to know that you're not alone. And I think opportunities like these help with that, help avoid Isolation Island. Um, we've got a couple of minutes for questions, and we did have a lot of questions come in, and there were a couple that I wanted to answer live. So, because we had so many questions, just know that if you asked a question and we aren't able to answer it today, please don't hesitate to reach out to your care services coordinator because they can certainly address your question. One of the questions we had came in, how do you build a support team when a loved one has ALS but doesn't want to tell anyone?
That again, that's another tricky one where you have to respect boundaries, right? Um, there's no right or wrong answer. Again, talk to the social worker at your clinic if you have one. Talk to your care services navigator about local counseling and therapy resources. Talk to people at your church. Talk. That's the common theme. Talk to others on how to do this. And hopefully that will allow a window to happen again where we can have that conversation. I think the message too is for those living with ALS to understand that there's a journey for their loved one as a caregiver and needing support, right? Because they can't do it alone too. There's going to be fatigue and burnout. That's just part of the journey. And so being honest about that too and saying, I understand that you don't want anybody else to know, and you may want only me to care for you, but I can't do it alone. And I think those are some conversations that have to happen.
Thank you. I think that's great. Jane just asked, what is a care services navigator? I didn't know my husband had one. So that is one of the services that we offer through the ALS Association. On our website, you can certainly ask your husband if he happens to know who that person is. But I'll put a link in the chat. You can look up your state and then you can find the contact information for the care services staff in your area. So Jane, I'll get that to you shortly. Another great question came in from a caregiver that says, how do you handle mild resentments of the changes while also shielding your care receiver or the person you're caring for?
Great questions. And I want to go back to, I've said care services navigator. You may have heard them as a care services coordinator, a care services manager, a care services liaison. That is a member of the ALS Association Care Services team. So again, if you haven't heard any of those, we want to make sure you know who to go to. So how do you resentment, right? It was resentment. That is where you have those honest conversations as a caregiver, because again, you're talking about what do you, as someone living with ALS, want? What do you want? What don't you want? How do you want to live? And ultimately, how do you want to die? All of us should be talking about that. As a caregiver, I need to be vulnerable and share that my frustration and resentment, it's not at you. And it may appear that on some days, it's at the disease. And I think we have to be honest about that. When you are running on empty and caregiver burnout and compassion fatigue are very real. It doesn't make you a monster when you're caring for someone deeply and you experience those things. It's a natural part of the journey. It's not a pretty part of the journey, but none of this is, right? But it's a part of the journey. And I think it's just being vulnerable and saying, you know what, today I had a whole lot less patience with you than I wanted. It's because I had no patience with the disease, and it's separating the two.
Thank you. And another question that's come up that I think is important to touch on is, how do you support someone who is talking about giving up or maybe hinting at something that sounds like they could be potentially suicidal?
Well, you definitely want to involve those who are trained. Of course, there is the suicide hotline, so I always put that out there. Mental health should always be a priority. You know, I shared my story of my mom, and this girl is on fire. So y'all know like how we approach things. We have that humor in there. Years ago, I was facilitating a support group, and it had those living with ALS and their loved ones. And Dutch, who has since passed, but he got on there and he said, we're talking about all these physical changes, and I know I can't walk like I used to, but can we just talk about how ticked off I am? And he didn't use those exact words. He goes, but I'm mad. Can we talk about that? I'm like, yes, we can. Let's talk about it. And let's talk about the other things that you're feeling too, because we don't want to shove those down. And so for your loved one living with ALS, you need to talk through that and connect them with more support. All right. And find out how they're feeling, what they need, because those are all at the root of those conversations too.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Well, thank you to everyone so much. We are unfortunately out of time today, but I again just want to say thank you for everyone who's participated. And Tanya, thank you for sharing your time and your passion and your knowledge with us. It's been really important information to share. So, a couple of reminders. You can view a recording of this webinar on our Empowering Your ALS Journey webinar page at als.org/webinars. And you'll also be able to use that webpage to view our past webinars, as well as sign up for future ones. I hope you'll consider joining us again for our next Empowering Your ALS Journey webinar, which is titled Supporting Your Breathing in ALS, What to Expect and Available Options, which will be held on Tuesday, February 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Lastly, just a final reminder that you'll get a short survey when we end this webinar, and your feedback is so very important to us. Again, thank you all, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for taking time out today. All right. Bye-bye.